One of the things I've always felt about creativity and invention is that it's not acquiring skills. And by skills, I'm talking about learning how to draw, learning how to paint, understanding aspects of color. These, for me, have always been the means to the end, not the end in themselves. It takes a certain talent to, I think, acquire some of these skills, but it isn't what makes art inventive and creative in the end. It is not learning to apply somebody else's techniques and turn them into your own painting and feel that they are necessarily inventive. Now, what makes invention is being able to look at sometimes very old things in a new way, open a new window of seeing on information that's been around and we've looked at so often. It's a very difficult thing to do. But there are ways of shedding light, new light on old things. And there's also a way that the arts have of shedding a light on aspects of our own culture, where it sits, what it's about. Each generation seems to define its own experiences, its own sense and definition of itself. And I want to talk about this idea of invention and creativity we're going to start off, and I'm going to talk briefly about Andy Warhol, I'm going to talk about Rembrandt, I'm going to talk about Monet. And what I want you to be aware of when we're looking at these, and what I'm going to describe, is what it is that allowed them to contribute something about the nature of who we are, the nature of the time we live in, the nature of the world around us, the nature of us as human beings. These are all qualities that brought forward in each of their ways a unique kind of vision, a unique way of reorchestrating the visual language in such a way that it accomplishes what I've just been talking about. And let's look at what they contributed. Let's start with the Warhol, for example. I've always thought it's very difficult. If you think about it, if you're an artist and somebody said to you, come up with a portrait and talk about the culture and use the portrait in a new way to speak about things. I've always found it interesting to look at those Warhols, and when I think particularly of images of, let's say, Elizabeth Taylor or Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley, I see them as a very two-dimensional kind of image. It's an image that you felt that you're not seeing the person as a three-dimensional human being, but rather as that thing we talk about called celebrity, the kind of thing we talk about today and use the term branding about. There is no sense of three-dimensional understanding or depth when you look at these things. On the contrary, as I said, it becomes very flat and two-dimensional. I want you to play that off against the other image we're going to look at, and that's Rembrandt. Look at this Rembrandt portrait and make a comparison. What is it that's inventive and creative about Rembrandt? He somehow can take paint and take drawing and manipulate it and put it together in such a way that we feel like we're seeing something about the inside of that person in a three-dimensional kind of way. Not just visually three-dimensional, but psychologically three-dimensional and emotionally three-dimensional. They are very intimate and telling portraits of people, unlike the Warhol, where he uses a very a technique that exemplifies and makes that kind of two-dimensionality happen, which is using a silkscreen and a photographic process, which makes it into a very mechanical and very unorganic kind of image. Then I want to move on now to someone else who I talked about in a past blog written down, and that's Monet. And say somebody asked you to paint what eternity might feel like, how would you go about that? Well, if we think about the Nymphias, those large paintings that he did, we look at a painting that stretches out peripherally for us. Then let's look how he at the width of it, which is really thin, and reinforces that length by doing it that thinly. Then let's think about the image itself. He's cutting off the foreground and he's cutting off the background. So all we're getting is that middle ground. It creates that quality of what eternal might feel like. And if you've ever gone to a museum where one of these paintings exists, or the Orangery, you'll see people sitting on the floor in this kind of rapt involvement. It pitches us in poetically into that work through how he has defined the length, width, and how he's cut off that image in the painting. I hope this has offered you at least some insight into at least how I look at invention and creativity. And I thank you for your time in watching this video, and I hope it has offered you something. You can also look at my website, my own work, if you care to it, William Nichols, Fine Art. Thank you much.